Well, hello. Welcome to Virtual 2020 SQL Server in Los Angeles. Our next presentation is Oleg Ulyanov, and the presentation is Architecting SQL Server on VMware vSphere, Doing It Right.
Hi all, and thanks a lot for joining our session today. My name is Oleg Ulyanov, and we are going to talk now about everything SQL Server on VMware vSphere. The main purpose of this session today is to give you an overview and background on what VMware is doing and what we can deliver as a company to support SQL Server workload on the leading virtualization platform. So the main point here and what we are going to discuss is what VMware can provide to support SQL Server high availability option, vSphere platform configuration recommendation, and also we're going to talk about new and hot topic is support for SQL Server on VMware hybrid clouds. We have a free section on the today's session, and I'm encouraging you to ask a question, and we will have a free short breaks between those free sections. So feel free to stay active and interact with us once you will have questions. And Steve, the organizer, I also want to thank him for the opportunity provided to be able to present at the SQL Saturday. It's really greatly appreciated. So he will take care of the question, and we will have a free short section to discuss. So now let us move on. Also, let me see if I can do webcam. Here you go. So we can use it as well. And now we're going to talk about VMware vSphere and SQL Server high availability option. It's a lot of exciting news for everyone who is already using vSphere platform, and it's also a lot to think about for all that are still not using VMware vSphere and still looking to bring some virtualized SQL Server platform. So first of all, a couple of things about SQL Server FCI or failover cluster instances. As you're all aware, FCI, the main goal of FCI is to provide high availability option for the whole SQL Server instance, and FCI is going to leverage Windows Server failover cluster to arbitrate and access to resources and to facilitate failover between the nodes. As you're all aware about, FCI would require a shared disk between VMs. So that is the main difference from all other high availability options for SQL Server. The one for FCI required to have a shared disk. What does it mean? That means to say that we need to share disk and provide an access to that shared disk to a separate VM from the ESXi platform. It's a lot of exciting things happening nowadays with vSphere 7.0 being able to provide support for clustered VMDK on fiber channel array. What does it mean for you? That you will just take a normal drive, a normal VMDK that you normally will be attaching to your VM, and then you can share it between your VMs as it will be a physical RDM. It's a great thing that simplify a lot management and operations of failover cluster on VMware. And that will help you a lot to migrate your existing failover clusters, if you have them, from physical RDMs, row mapped LANs to just VMDK. The most important thing, right, and to bear in mind that we require to have these SCSI controllers that will be used to attach your shared disk to use physical SCSI bus sharing, and we require anti-affinity groups so that we would ensure that neither of these VM will be running on the same ESXi host, because other way around, it's not a really high available solution. It's a lot of improvements that has happened for failover cluster, starting with vSphere 6.0, and we have enabled support for virtual volumes on the 6.7. And one of the best things that we have is support for vMotion. So you are able to live migrate your VM with physical RDMs or with clustered VMDK between different ESXi hosts. Of course, you will need to have your source and target ESXi hosts having an access to your shared disk. Also important thing that we have a hybrid HTI platform, which is called vSAN in VMware, and we also support just shared VMDK and vSAN starting with 6.7 update 3. Also, one important thing to mention for everyone here, multi-writer flag is not supported nor required. What does it mean? That all of your installation of Windows Server local cluster with shared disk on vSphere should not be using multi-writer flag in VMware vSphere settings. We will move on, and that is screenshot from the web client showing you how you will need to configure your VM in order to support shared disk shared between your VMs, right? For physical VM, you will be setting compatibility mode to physical and SCSI bus sharing set to physical. We're also going to stop after the next slide, and I'm going to take a question, if any, for hosting high availability SQL Server and VMware, because that is where I have seen most of the questions coming up from our fields, partners, and customers. Now let us talk about a little bit always-on availability groups, right? Availability groups provides high availability on database level. I personally recommend to use at least SQL Server 2016 and higher for that, due to a lot of improvements that were introduced in SQL Server 2016 to support availability groups. As you all know, availability groups relies on SQL Server to replicate data either synchronously or asynchronously over the network. It's nothing really from a VMware platform that would require to support this configuration, right? Because also, as you know, availability groups still use Windows Server local cluster, but would not require shared storage. We support availability group without any restriction or special configuration on VMware vSphere. It's really nothing that you will need to do from vSphere or VMware perspective to support your availability group installation. We still highly recommend to use anti-affinity groups, so that to ensure that both nodes of your availability group would not be hosted on the same ESXi host. We recommend to check your habit settings of underlying WSFC cluster to make sure that you can support live vMotion, and we highly recommend 10 gig network to support your always-on availability groups configuration on vSphere. And now let me stop for a moment and ask you if it's any questions or anything to clarify, because one again, from my perspective, supporting SQL Server in highly available configuration vSphere is one of the most difficult and most asked topic from our community. Any questions?
I don't see any questions from attendees, but I can ask you a question about, do you have any best practices to share? And not specifically for high availability solutions, but just in general, running SQL Server on VMware. I think there are some best practices in that area, what to enable, what not to enable. If you prepare for that question, of course. And actually, there are questions from attendees as well. Oleg? Oleg?
Okay, let us move on. And we will
Oleg,
synchronize with Steve if it would be any question. So now let us come up with the next topic, which will be how you would host SQL Server on VMware-powered hybrid clouds. That is an important topic and a very hot topic now in the whole industry. And the thing is, what you can do Just give me a moment.
Okay. You can hear me, right?
I'm just trying to figure out what we can do so that I would be able to hear you.
Okay, no problem.
Just give me a moment.
Sure, not a problem.
Oh, now I can hear you all of a sudden.
Awesome. Okay, forget about my question. Since there are 3 questions from attendees, it's much better, much more interesting. So please explain more on the replication between members of AG. This is a question from Uday.
Sure thing. So let me go back to the AG. And so the thing is, when we are talking about availability groups, right, actually the replication itself will be handled by SQL Server itself. And that means that all the data will be sent over the network. So in a nutshell, what is happening, if you have an availability groups configured, right, and you have your primary being active and secondary, let us assume configured for synchronous replication, it means that once a transaction will be received by the primary node, it will be then sent over the network exactly the same data to the database configured as a synchronous for synchronous replication, and we will confirm to the application that the transaction is hardened only once it will be hardened on the secondary database. Right, so one again, in order to really leverage replication for availability groups, your main prerequisite is a good network. Does this answer the question? Or feel free to follow up.
Okay, where can I download the presentation slides for all? The presentation, obviously, you uploaded to SQL Server website, right?
Yeah, exactly. That was my intent.
Okay.
So I will upload this deck after, as soon as my session is done, it will be
Okay, not a problem.
on the website.
Okay, after failover, are the databases on a failed over node readable?
Is it for availability groups or is it for FCI? Would be my follow-up question. So if you,
I guess you can answer both.
Yeah, so the thing is, if you will be using FCI and Windows Server failover cluster, right, then actually after failover, it will be absolutely the same instance. So database will be in write read state exactly as it was before because it will be using the same disk. When we are talking about availability groups, it depends of how you configure your availability groups and what should happen if failover will occur, right? And for synchronous application, we can configure in both ways, so it could stay read-only or it could become writable once the failover will happen. We can move on.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. So any other questions, Steve?
No, none. Go ahead.
Okay. Perfect. Then let us jump to the topic. What you will do if you want to host SQL Server workload on hybrid clouds. So first of all, let us talk about hybrid cloud concept as well, as I'm really, from my perspective, I'm finding this idea really brilliant. So what we can do, we can basically bring the same vSphere infrastructure to public clouds. So in a nutshell, what now VMware can provide using our VCF or VMware Cloud Foundation, it will be the same instance of vSphere software running on a bare metal host, right? It is still a bare metal, but those hosts will be hosted inside either AWS data center or Azure or Google Cloud or even Alibaba Cloud. What does it mean for us? That basically we are leveraging capabilities of public clouds, but we are having the same instance of VMware vSphere running off top of that cloud. And not only vSphere, we will be using vSAN to provide the storage layer, and we will be using NSX to facilitate everything about networking, including microsegmentation and distributed firewall, and the ability to leverage direct connect to connect your on-premises to VMware Cloud. Also important thing, in terms of the UI, this installation inside of the public cloud would look exactly the same as just a normal vSphere. But it also will provide you a way to connect to additional services, either provided as AWS, as you're seeing here, I'm using VMware Cloud on AWS as an example, but it's the same as Azure or Google because it's basically located inside of the same cloud. The one important thing for VMware Cloud on AWS, it's not only VMware bits, it's also a jointly engineered solution with AWS. Basically, we are working together with AWS to provide a new code, a new platform that you can leverage to host your workload. And I will switch now to just to show how it's look like. I hope that you are able to see my screen. Because I should be showing the whole screen, right? And that is where you see my on-premises vCenter running just a normal set of ESXi hosts, right? So that would be my just a normal Dell hardware. And that is the infrastructure that is connected to public cloud, right? So that is the host that would be running inside of AWS. You will see that it's actually EC2 instances, but it's not a shared EC2 instances. As mentioned, vSphere will be just deployed on a bare metal i3 host. And what can I do? So actually, if I will go here and I will take my VM, I can simultaneously migrate it in both direction, right? So I can take it from here, click on migrate and say, okay, so now I would eager to go back and say, okay, let me take one cluster and see what will happen, right? So I might need to power it off, right, in order to facilitate this migration. But the idea is it's a simultaneously connected environment that you can use to move and host your workload, both inside of your on-premises and inside public cloud. In terms of the console itself, so let me switch back. That is how this infrastructure would look like. That is a services that has been created. So it's look like that I would need to log in back. So let me spend 2 minutes on doing that. I will be just right back to you. From the console perspective, that is where you would be able to configure all the required networking services, distributed firewalls, and the access to your environment. So that is a separate console that facilitate you access to VMware-powered hybrid cloud on VMware Cloud on AWS. And the main benefits of that, as we are seeing, it's a 3 major use cases, which will be data center extension. That is what I have shown. That is where you would just extend your data center to AWS or to Azure platform. It could be evacuation, where meaning you will be fully abandon your on-premises estate and move everything to VMware-powered cloud. Or it could be DR, and actually for DR, it's a very interesting use case, as you can elastically grow your workload. So you can run your DR platform just really with a small subset of hosts, just with a 2 or 3 hosts. But then if required, the platform will automatically scale itself to provide a required server to host your workload. Now let me switch back to my presentation and let me see what we can do with that, right? So actually, we can use a number of technologies to move your workload, which could be live or cold vMotion just inside of your vSphere UI, or you can use HCX or hybrid cloud extension. that would facilitate migration of your VM. You can use a bulk migration, saying, okay, I want to migrate these 400 VMs and I want to start this migration on next Sunday. And during the next week, HTX will pre-replicate all the data to your cloud, and then we'll do a switchover with a designated moment of time. Or we can use the same vMotion, or we can even combine bulk migration with the vMotion. So we will actually pre-replicate everything, and then we will switch over live running VM from your on-premises to the public cloud. From SQL Server perspective, VMware Cloud on AWS fully supports all of the deployments of SQL Server, like single instance, availability groups, or even failover cluster instance. You can host all of these infrastructures for SQL Server back to VMware hybrid clouds. You can even do a stretch availability groups using asynchronous application. You can have one node running inside of VMware Cloud and two nodes being in a synchronous application running on premises. Let me now stop here for a while and let me ask Steve if it's any questions.
Okay, while I'm waiting for any questions,
Sure.
what would be so I guess VMware Cloud on public cloud, it works great for companies that already has a VMware and they're trying to shift some of their private cloud that are actually virtualized and consolidated some pieces of that into a cloud, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that is most probably our, like, most of our customers are exactly like that. So they do have a VMware estate and they would like to move or shift some of the workload to public cloud. But we also do support a brand new deployment. Like if you want just to have a public cloud with VMware software, that is what you also can get.
Okay, how easy it is? So let's say I have a virtualized server on VMware in my private cloud, and I decided, well, you know what? It's not, I don't want to have it in a private cloud. I'm not ready to get rid of the whole private cloud. So how easy it is going to be to move that server from my private cloud on VMware to VMware on AWS?
So it's a couple of things, right? First things to mention is once your environment is fully configured and ready to use, your migration is actually just the same as you will be moving your VM between your on-premises cluster or between your on-premises ESXi host. So it's basically the same procedure, right? But as we are not doing a real marketing here, right, it's a couple of things, of course, that you will need to take into account. And the first thing first, I would say the most complicated thing that we found out for hybrid cloud deployment is your networking, right? So you need to have network connectivity to a VM that is moved to public cloud. And it could be achieved by either establishing a VPN or using any kind of direct connect services, or even with HTX, you can extend your original VLAN. Basically, you would not even need to re-IP your workload while migrating to public cloud. But as mentioned, networking is probably a big space where you would need to spend time to pre-configure everything before you can actually deploy your workload.
Got it. So it sounds like you're saying that networking or connectivity would be the biggest bottleneck.
Exactly. It's not only bottleneck, it's also what require a lot of things to be taken care of, right? So you will need to ensure that all required VLANs are available, that all your routing is available, that while you move to some of your workload to public cloud, you will still have the required connectivity between all of the pieces of your environment.
Got it. So there is a question from Uday. He's asking, is VMware Cloud Trial and AWS account a good start to get hands-on?
Yeah, exactly. So we provide a two-way how you can, if you want, how you can get familiar with VMware Cloud on AWS. So one of them, we are providing a hands-on lab where we're actually simulating the interface. But if you want to have a real feel of the environment, we have an offering for 30 days trial for one host. So you can do that, and that is called a quick start. And you can reach out to me. I believe Steve should be having my contact, and I can share details with you how you can start this trial.
Awesome, thank you. That's all the questions so far. Go ahead, please
Perfect.
proceed.
Then exactly, let me move forward. So now let us take a look at what you want to do to host your SQL Server effectively and efficiently on the vSphere platform. And that is where I really like this citate here, because really, first of all, we are facing with a lot of performance, not the issues, but really questions. Then the basic for them is you will need to understand what is happening while you're hosting SQL Server on a virtual environment. And that is the table that probably summarizes the most important points to take care of while virtualizing your SQL Server. So from physical hardware, ensure that you're using servers that are on VMware compatibility list. It's a lot of things that we have seen with SQL servers that are actually going down the path that your physical hardware is neither not supported or part of it not supported, like network or storage. So please ensure that STL is something that you check before moving on. Power policies, that is the thing that I really want you to take care of. We have seen a lot of performance issues just because your physical server just all of a sudden would decide, oh, you don't need all the processor power that I have, so let me put some of my processor into DBAs state. So normally we recommend to pass control over power settings directly to ESXi host. How you can do that? To configure your BIOS on your physical server to pass the settings as far as control. Hyper-threading, it's a lot has been told and said about hyper-threading, but our main idea and main recommendation is you will need to enable hyper-threading on your ESXi host, on your server BIOS, so that we would be having both physical and logical threads to be able to support your vSphere and SQL Server workload. But then when you will be doing a sizing of your SQL Server, you will be doing sizing based on physical threads. So just to give an example, if you have a server with 36 physical cores and 72 logical, you don't want to create a VM having a 72 CPU assigned to it. You can do it, but that would already means 2-to-1 overcommitment. So you want to have 36 CPU maximum assigned to a VM with SQL Server workload, but still you want to have hyper-threading enabled on your physical host so that you would be having an additional logical threads being able to support the run of your VM. And it's a lot of things that was said about NUMA. So for the NUMA thing, or non-uniform memory access, my best recommendation to you is actually two of them. First, understand fully how non-uniform memory access works. That is the first one. And the second one, default settings on your ESXi host will probably provide best NUMA performance. And it's some workloads, some SQL Server workloads that may benefit of a special configuration of NUMA. But if it's done correctly, you basically should be already taken care of. And I will show you a couple of things that is important to make sure that you are doing the right thing with NUMA nodes. From the ESXi host perspective, I would recommend one again to recheck your power policy to make sure that your virtual switches and vMotion port groups are configured accordingly, and also make sure that you're using latest and greatest builds that support your server. From the VM perspective, that is a couple of things that I would like you to pay attention to, and just to ensure that it will be really good in terms of what you're taking out from this session. Let me switch to my ESXi environment. Right? That is the environment that I want to show. So let us create a VM and let us take a look what settings you would recommend to observe while you will be creating a VM for SQL Server. So let me just go here and say, okay, that will be SQL Server VM. I'm going to put it inside of that cluster. We're going to use NFS data store to store it. So that is the thing. While selecting your compatibility level, make sure that you would take the latest one that would be supported by all hosts in your cluster, because that not only would expose your latest hardware capabilities, it would also expose to your latest processors capability. For example, Nehalem instruction was enabled with ESXi65, so meaning that your VM having a compatibility ESXi60, it would not able to profit from all this new CPU stack. And you can, of course, upgrade your VM compatibility after your VM has been created. From the guest OS, make sure that you will be using exactly the guest OS that would be installed. Also, I want to bring to your attention, if I will go back and I will say, okay, I want to have a compatibility just 6.5, and let me go next. You will see that it will be no Windows Server 2019 in the list. So if you intend to use Windows Server 2019, you will need to choose at least 67U2 or ESXi70, because that is where we introduce support to Windows Server 2019. Oh, let me go further, and that is where you will be faced with your VM configuration. So let me just finish and create this VM, and then we can go through the process of aligning this hardware settings. So we have a new VM being created. That is my SQL Server VM. So let me go and edit settings for it. So first of all, for your CPU, the things that you really want to pay attention to is how you will be assigning your CPU cores. So if I want to assign, for example, 24 vCPU to my VM, that is the default behavior of vSphere. It will create 2 cores and 12 sockets, right? And your server, I wouldn't expect that it would have 12 sockets. So what you want to do is rather to say, okay, I want to have 12 cores that will be based on 2 sockets. So reflect your physical hardware while assigning cores per socket, because it has an amplification for SQL Server. If I would create my VM with just 2 cores and 12 sockets, SQL Server would disable level 3 cache optimization for all queries running using parallel execution plan, because SQL will believe I'm running on a server with 12 independent sockets. So make sure that you're doing the right things and do not expose more sockets that you really have. And CPU hot add should stay disabled. That is how we are configuring it by default, and that is where we are seeing a best performance. If you enable CPU hot add, it will disable NUMA presentation to your VM. So that will be probably 2 most important things to be aware about your CPU presentation. Let me move on. While assigning memory.
Oleg,
sure.
There are questions.
Yeah.
So are you showing different screens? I see only one screen.
You see only my presentation screen. Is it correct?
What we're seeing is the VMware Cloud on AWS.
Okay. Let me see how can I fix it. That's a good point.
You probably have just dual monitors.
No, I don't have dual monitors. It's just the same laptop. So it's should be. Let me see sharing. Let me click on stop showing and then show screen. Are you able to see web client right now?
Yes.
Okay.
What we see is vSphere, a browser.
It's a browser where you're seeing edit settings for a SQL Server VM. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so then let me repeat. I'm sorry for that, and thanks for bringing this to my attention. So Now let me repeat for CPU configuration screen, all right? If you want to present 24 CPUs, you want to have it correctly reflected in your cores per socket configuration, right? So you don't want to expose here more sockets that you really have in your physical server. So one again, for 24 CPUs presented to your VM, your RAID configuration will be not 1 cores and 24 sockets, but it should be 12 cores and 2 sockets, right? So now let us go to memory. From the memory perspective, ensure that you are assigning no more than you really have on your server. And for the high performance, recommendation will be to reserve all guest memory. Let us move to the disk. From the disk perspective, it's a couple of things to bear in mind. So we have the first disk that being attached to your LSI logic source control, and that is fine. But now let me add a new disk, because we really recommend to have your SQL Server data being located on a separate disk. So I have presented a new disk, but we also want to ensure best performance for it. That is why I'm going to use a new SCSI controller. And for that new SCSI controller, we are going to use VMware PowerVirtual as a controller type. For highly loaded SQL Server, VMware PowerVirtual could give you up to 10% performance improvement with the lowest CPU utilization, because LSI Logic SAS is just LSI Logic controller, and it will be using the same driver. And for example, for VMware PowerVirtual, we are allowing you to tune your queue depths. It's not allowed for LSI Logic SAS, right? So that is the things to have in mind while working with your controllers. And if you would be required to share your disk, that is where you would be selecting a physical SCSI bus sharing, because physical SCSI bus sharing would allow you to pass SCSI-free persistent reservation command from your VM back to your storage. And now let me move to the networking adapter. For networking adapter, the important one will be not to use E1000. You could not change it once it's created. So what you will need to do is to add a new controller, and that is where we are going to use a new network adapter. And for this new network adapter, we are going to change it from E1000 to use VMXNet3, because VMXNet3 will allow you to use receive side scaling. And that is where really your performance will be much better compared to default E1000 controller that you might have set for your Windows VM. So it's a couple of things to recheck. I would really recommend you to recheck your cores per socket ratio while you're going back to your infrastructure. I would really recommend to recheck how many disks and how many controllers you have, and split your disk evenly between 4 SCSI controllers. That is the maximum number of controllers that we are supporting right now. And for your network adapter, ensure that you're using VMXNet3 as your default controller type. From my perspective, that is probably the most important configuration settings that would help your SQL Server to run effectively and efficiently on VMware infrastructure. Now let me turn out to Steve for any questions and anything that I can share in addition to what you have seen already.
Sure. So Uday is asking if the VMware Cloud on AWS, if it's a jointly engineered cloud service, if you guys working with AWS.
Exactly. Yeah. That is how VMware Cloud on AWS is born. It's actually a joint engineering solution. So we are jointly developing and testing our bits together with AWS to ensure that we are supporting AWS feature and to ensure that all VMware features are fully supported on the AWS hardware. And also that is different, for example, from Azure VMware solution, because VMware solution Azure on Azure is developed and supported by Microsoft. What we are doing, we are providing the same bits as we are using on AWS, but it will be Microsoft to implement and support it. right? For VMware Cloud on AWS, support and maintenance will be provided by VMware.
Interesting. What about GCP?
That is the same. So the only cloud solution that being jointly developed is VMware Cloud on AWS. Everything else is basically up to public cloud provider to maintain and support it. So Google Cloud would be doing that.
So basically, if you have any problem with VMware on GCP, you call GCP. Same for Azure.
Exactly.
In case of AWS, you can call VMware. Okay.
Exactly. For AWS, you will be having a direct access to VMware support as a part of your subscription, in addition to your AWS support.
And I think you mentioned other public cloud providers. I think you mentioned Alibaba.
Yeah.
How developed is that?
So again, everything else except of VMware Cloud on AWS, everything else will be supported by respective vendor of public cloud. So the only really joint engineering solution is VMware Cloud on AWS.
So sounds like, to you personally, you just have more control in AWS because it's controlled by VMware. In case of other public cloud providers, it's controlled by them.
Exactly.
So they decide which features to implement or not. Okay.
Exactly. That will be up to them what set of features, what set of technologies they would be providing based on our bids. I would say we're still doing a kind of interaction with all these major cloud players, right? So for example, we insisting that they would be using the latest builds. They are not allowed to run like the releases that are outdated, right? So that is something that we would be, to some extent, we require them to do so. But from the feature set perspective, that will be absolutely up to Microsoft or up to Google what part of the feature set will be implemented.
Got it. Thank you.
Perfect. So, Steve, I would actually say that I can give back 15 minutes time to the audience if it's no more questions, and we can stop here, or I can be here to answer questions.
Sure, let me try. So I tried in a previous session to unmute all. It didn't work. Let's see if this is going to work now. I don't know if unmuting all is going to be a good idea, but at least we can try.
It could be. Yeah, let us give it a try.
And looks like it doesn't work.
Okay.
I click on unmute and everyone is still muted.
Yeah, so it looks like that you will be the most important person, right? Because you will be facilitating the interaction between the audience and the presenter. So
yes, the main filter.
Exactly. Okay, so we can wait for 1 or 2 minutes if it will be any new questions to come. As mentioned, I will upload the presentation today to the SQL Saturday website. And once again, I'm very thankful to Steve to give us a chance to be a sponsor and to help SQL Saturday, and also to have a chance to present to you. So I really appreciate
that. What do you think VMware's future is? So I'm guessing most companies would move to public cloud. Where would that leave VMware?
That's a good question, right? And that is why, from my perspective, what I'm thinking that this initiative to support hybrid clouds is a very important for VMware future. So the thing is, right, it's especially for big enterprises, is not that easy to move all the workload at a one click to public clouds, right? It still requires that you will be re-architecting, sometimes even refurbishing your code. And it's still a lot of applications that will stay on premises. And hence allowing enterprises to have a way to use like best of both worlds, right? So still to have some kind of connectivity and the same tool sets that you will be using for your public cloud deployment, and still have a very tight connection to your on premises. That is a good way to move forward. And I believe that is where VMware future is, at least for the next couple of years, is to facilitate and support enterprises by the demand to use public clouds, but sometimes they would not be able to really run application directly on native public clouds.
Just a controversial question for you, because I want to embarrass you a bit. Why VMware didn't develop its own public cloud?
Okay, so that is we are still being recorded, right? So that would allow allow me a lot of flexibility onto that, but I would just say that we tried to develop our own public cloud, and that was called vCloud Air. And then we just realized that it will be for VMware. It would bring more to collaborate better with major public clouds like AWS or Azure, and just to support them as a way to provide the services together with these public clouds players, right? And we are just seeing that we are more effective in providing hybrid cloud, that, for example, our major public clouds could be allowed to. So that means to say we have a more expertise for on-premises, and now we are combining this expertise in on-premises with what we are having inside of the public cloud providers, right? And that is why we are just more seeing that our future is one again in more in supporting these hybrid configurations.
Got it. Okay, we have a question. Is VMware on Azure Cloud a good combo? You've been recorded.
So, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. So I mean to say that we absolutely support all the deployment of VMware, and I would say that for some specific use cases, implementation of VMware Cloud on top of Azure is a really good fit. And that is a good fit, for example, also for SQL Server workload, because also you need to understand that from licensing perspective, if you're deploying Azure VMware Cloud solution, it basically would be having the same licensing rule as a native Azure, right? So that might bring to your SQL Server state a lot of better licensing options. And also for VDI workload, especially Windows VDI-based workload, and I would say for general Windows workload, being hosted on Azure will give you a lot of more combination to support your Windows services that you can access from the Azure cloud. And from my own perspective, what I have tested for now, Microsoft implementation of VMware Cloud is actually quite comparable to what we are doing with AWS. So one again, it's something that we are still patching and we are engineering VMware Cloud on AWS, and for Azure, we are letting Microsoft to do so.
Thank you.
Let's give it a few more minutes for questions.
Sure.
Oh, looks like Uday is actually. Uday, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I
Go
just
ahead.
unmuted. Yeah, thank you for your answer on the VMware on Azure Cloud. I was really wondering, it can only work good with the AWS, right? So that's why I was curious about that.
No. So what I would encourage you is basically we do have a promotion for VMware Cloud on AWS. I suppose that Microsoft might have the same for Azure. So I would recommend you to test it out and see what will best fit to your environment. Because normally we have seen that VMware Cloud on AWS is more a good fit for customers that already have some workload running on AWS, right? And that is where you can integrate workload and AWS services very easily with your VMware workload, right? And for Azure, that is the same. If you have already some estate running on Azure, then probably Azure VMware solution would be more native choice for you.
Okay, because all the SQL Server new features are going to be released in Azure first, right? That's why I was wondering. Yeah, right.
Yeah, that is the thing that also we all know. That is why, for example, for SQL Server, I'm absolutely honestly saying that Azure VMware solution is really comparable in terms of SQL Server capabilities to, and it would also outweigh some of the benefits of running VMware Cloud on AWS.
Oh, okay, thank you. I have one more question. Like when you set up the
Sure.
always on Azure, right? Always on availability groups. So when it comes to VMware, if the VMware one node fails over to the other node, right? And you said the replication is basically is kind of binary, not SQL replication.
No,
Right?
no, it's SQL replication. It's SQL replication.
Oh, okay, okay. Then there is consistency then.
Yeah, exactly. It's absolutely consistent because availability groups is nothing. So VMware doesn't introduce anything else. It's really just a SQL Server based application. It's the same availability groups.
Okay, thank you.
Not at all.
And one more thing, Oleg. So for about 20 minutes, right? I was seeing the same screen. The screen is like a VMware cloud on AWS jointly engineered cloud. While you were talking about so many other settings, right? I think we have really missed that. Will your presentation will be available on the SQL Pass later?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I will upload my presentation today, and I'm really sorry for that. And thanks a lot, Steve, for correcting me. Unfortunately, from my screen, I was not able to really understand if I'm sharing or not. And it was just basically saying that I'm sharing, and they have shared the whole screen. And it looked like that for some reason, as always, for this online platform, right? It was just like stopped my presentation once I moved away from the main window. So once again, I'm sorry for that.
Right,
it's my mistake. Yeah, I think lesson for me is for next presenters is to tell them each time they're changing the screen, what the screen that I'm seeing. Because apparently you don't even know that.
No, it wasn't. It was absolutely transparent for me, and it was just saying that everything is presenting. So once again, I'm really sorry for that, and I hope that still it was a value from listening to what I was telling. But of course, it will be better to support it with the slides and with the screens that I was showing. So once again, I'm sorry for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Oleg, by any chance, do you have a contact page? If people have any questions for you, do you have a LinkedIn profile?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What I will do that in my presentations that I will upload, I will just add my contact so that you would be able to send the questions.
Oleg, thank you very much. Any questions from attendees? We have 3 more minutes. Well, while we're waiting, thanks, Oleg, for your presentation. Thanks to VMware for sponsoring our event. Maybe you have 2 minutes to talk how great VMware is.
Sure, I can do that, but I believe that it's actually the presentation itself. It's about VMware technical capabilities. And I would say that VMware as a platform is able to support almost all kinds of SQL Server workloads that you would be running. So it's I would say that nowadays I haven't seen a lot of examples where still staying on physical would help you, even if I know a lot of customers still doing physical SQL servers that somehow impressed me. But I just want to, by this presentation, to make sure that for the attendees, it's clear that what we are doing as a company is actually to help to run your workload better. And that is the main intent of VMware platform and VMware powered hybrid clouds.
Okay. Uday said, thank you for your presentation. Oleg, thank you for presenting. Attendees, thank you for attending Oleg's session. I think I'll go back to slides on Rafał. Thank you, Oleg.
Exactly. Yep. Thank you all. Bye.
Bye-bye.